You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wood.
And I'm Jennifer Connor.
From Equestrian Businesswomen, and you're listening to Equestrian B2B, the podcast that brings together industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and equestrians for conversations about how they build and sustain a successful business.
On today's show, we speak to Katie Navarra Bradley about what a coach does, when you need to seek one out, and how to best utilize their services.
Katie Navarra Bradley is a business performance coach who is passionate about helping individuals, teams, and small business owners discover their unique strengths and elevate their communication skills to achieve personal and professional success.
She is also a content marketing strategist and writer who works with clients to establish themselves as thought leaders. Her co-authored book, Shoeing the Modern Horse, was named the best equine nonfiction book of 2022. She is based in New York's Capital Region. Learn more at www.katienavarra.com, and you can find her newsletter, Words of Winston, on Substack. Hi, Katie. It's so great to have you on. I know we were supposed to have you come to Saratoga Women in Business, but it didn't quite work out. But we're excited to have you on to talk about the topics that you were going to speak on at the Women in Business Spectacular. And, get started and jump right in.
Hi, Jen and Connor. I am excited to be here today, and I was very disappointed to miss your event in Saratoga. As your audience can appreciate, we had a horse health emergency that day that required an inpatient procedure for our mare and her young foal. So apologize that we missed being with you that day, but I'm excited to be here on your podcast.
Yeah, that's great. We're so happy to have you.
Yep.
So you were going to talk a little bit about at the Women in Business about what your business is, and you are a coach. So can you tell us what inspired you to become a coach?
Sure. So I should back up just a little bit. My business actually has two sides to it.
Okay.
The way that I actually launched my business was through my initial career as a journalist, freelance journalist, and content strategist and creator. And for many years, I worked in corporate communication settings while I was building that business, and launched in 2020. It was planned to launch in 2020. My last day at work was a week before the pandemic. I went home
Oh my
and
gosh.
the whole world shut down.
Yeah.
But it was, it really, truly was the best timing that I could have asked for. And so when I finally took that leap and created my own business, it was an opportunity for me to also have time to dig more into leadership, which is an area that I've been passionate about since my college days. I studied interorganizational communication at SUNY Geneseo and really got into the dynamics of teamwork and communicating and different communication styles and how that influences all of our relationships, whether that's at work or personal. And while I was at Geneseo, I was part of their Gold Leadership Program, which was in its development phases at that point in time, and eventually became a model for other colleges across the country to develop a student leadership certification program.
Cool.
It was quite in depth, and it was a really interesting experience. It kind of started me on this whole path that I didn't even realize back then when I was in college. So when I got out of college, like I mentioned, I had a couple of corporate jobs before my own company. And at 22, I was managing people and realizing there were a lot of dynamics that go on with running a distribution store and having customers come in, managing your clients. And so I just always kept studying that leadership. And I participated in different academies through the Chamber of Commerce, through a leadership association locally. And so when I finally had this time in my life, because I was running my own business, I decided to go and become a credentialed International Coaching Federation coach. And that program was offered through Rutgers University and geared towards executive coaching. So we kind of came at it from the executive background.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. And I love you mentioning, courses and continuing education that you took when you were working before you started your own company. Because I think a lot of people, maybe in our industry, don't take advantage of those outside resources and don't look into it. And I think there's a lot out there for people if they want to learn those skills and become, a better business person or a better leader, all of those.
I really do love learning about a lot of different things. Sometimes I think I have to rein myself back in because I could be that person that signs up for everything. And while I was training to become a coach, I was introduced to the Clifton Strengths Assessment, which is based on 34 different dynamics of your strengths. Okay. And unsurprisingly, futuristic and learner are in my top 5. So I was like, oh, now I understand why every time somebody tries to sell me a course or there's an exciting workshop that comes up, I raise my hand. But I have really benefited from having many different perspectives as I build my own business.
I feel like I'm the same. Like I've been toying with taking an acting class to help me with my sales skills and, just trying out different things. And I do think that people in the equine industry get so stuck in our industry that they don't look outside at programs that could help enhance their skills on this side of it. And I do think like leadership skills are super important in any role that you play. Whether you're just an employee or you're the boss, I think it's important to understand about leadership. So that's really interesting. Are you an equine assisted coach? Is that what your business is?
So I do offer traditional coaching sessions that are one-on-one, whether that's via Zoom like we're doing or in person. But the niche I really am striving to develop is equine assisted coaching. And so the parameters are very similar. My goal is to help individuals and teams kind of look inward, reflect on where their challenges are, where they want their career path to go, or their teams, and help them bring that out. The difference is that I'm doing that with my horses. And number one, just because I love horses, but as all of us here know, horses have this innate sense to help us understand, quote unquote, what we're doing wrong or what we're missing, or what we might have struggling to really be vulnerable about. And horses can do this in a way that's so non-judgmental. When you hear that from somebody else, sometimes it can sting a little bit, or we may not be ready to hear it from a colleague. But when a horse reacts to a tone of voice that we've had or notices an insecurity, there's a feeling of just maybe a comfort level that we can acknowledge that in a little bit of a different way than sitting with our boss or the peers that we work with every day.
Yeah, horses kind of, they don't hide secrets. Right?
I don't think they're capable of that.
No.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I have a cousin who has some handicaps and she had a horse, and, he could be a little bit of a jerk on the racetrack for the rest of us, but he was always very kind to her, and they have a sense, about people. I love that about it.
Well, and what's really interesting, my lead mare in the program is she's as quiet can come. And she is a show horse, so she has a little bit more training than maybe some others. But if she doesn't want to do something for somebody, whether it's because something's bothering her or because their approach is just not connecting with her approach, she'll just kind of stand there and throw her head up. And my co-facilitator had a moment with her, like last year. It was kind of interesting. She said, "Oh, Bella told me we're not doing this today." and my co-facilitator said she actually sensed that the horse was picking up on her nervous vibes on a story that she had just shared that had made her vulnerable. And so it was not only were we, leading other people that were attending, but it was also being able to use our own in the moment experiences to really illustrate what was going on. Thanks to Bella.
And do you find that this works even with people who already know horses and have been around horses? And, I've heard of lots of programs for companies where, teams go in and work with horses in order to learn things, but those are people who have maybe never even seen a horse in person before. And you're working with equestrians. How does that make it easier or harder?
So the friend of mine that I co-facilitate with, before we started doing this work. And I did actually go and become a certified instructor through E3A. But the two of us went down to a facility about an hour and a half south from where we live that offers these programs. And on the entire way down, she and I were talking about, how is this going to work? Is there anything that we can really learn from this? And we're both horse people. I've grown up with horses. She's got into horses as an adult, but has had one for probably 20 years now. And I will tell you that one of the exercises was moving 3 horses from one end of a large indoor arena to the complete opposite end of the indoor arena without touching them. These were, some of the horses had never been used in this program before. It was a cold February day. And from some of the earlier activities, they were already showing that they were a little bit rambunctious and maybe not willing to separate from the herd. And we failed. We could not get them to, and we were not allowed to use halters or leads. We couldn't get them from point A to point B.
Wow.
And the discussion that came out of that was not so much about our horsemanship skills, but did we have the right goal defined for the moment? Did we take into account that the weather was what it was? Did we take into account that maybe these horses weren't prepared to work in their group together, or maybe they weren't feeling comfortable or have that feeling of safety that they needed? And did we need to, for the group that participated, did we need to go back and reevaluate that goal? Should we have said, look, maybe that's our goal for 6 months from now, but we're going to break it down into this step for right now? So I found that really interesting. And on our whole ride home, we were like, wow, there is something to be learned, even if you have grown up on a horse.
Yeah.
Since infancy.
Really cool. We've talked a little bit about you being a coach and doing it, whether it's online or in person, and being equine assisted. Is there a difference between a career coach and a business coach?
Coaching, like a lot of other industries, can get very niche very quick. So there are a lot of coaches who can work with people with different goals. They may be somebody who is interested in defining what their next step is in their career, or what their next step is in their business. And then there are other people who focus narrowly on that topic. And one example I'll give is I've recently met a woman who worked in her college's career services center for her entire career. And now that she is retiring, she is going to offer coaching services exclusively to individuals, most of them coming out of college, to help them prepare and find that first job. And so she has really deep knowledge in that area that she can bring to that situation. Similar to a business coach, if you have a business coach with really deep knowledge about what it's like to start a business, to monitor the finances, to have to hire people, they can put themselves in the shoes of the coachee. But there are coaches that can do both. And then there are others who choose to really focus on one area of specialty over another.
Okay. And do you find there's differences in working with someone who is an employee at a corporation versus someone who's a small business owner?
That is a great question.
So I imagine some of the leadership qualities are the same, whether you run the whole thing or if you're a manager in a larger corporation. But I feel like, I don't know, as a small business owner, I would feel a lot different about it, I think.
I think that there are some differences. You allude to, as far as communication, I think that is similar regardless of where we are and the interpersonal dynamics we can run into.
Mm-hmm.
I think where it starts to get a little different, in a corporation, that individual, depending on their position, may or may not have control over the end outcome.
Yeah.
So coaching them through their challenge, or even to perhaps what their next step will be, needs to be within the parameters of what they decide they want to control and actions that they want to take.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's running a business, they can make that decision to hire or fire somebody. They can make that decision to invest in a new service offering. And so their goals are just slightly different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I know you said you do work with people who are outside of the equine industry, but what's kind of your mix? Do you have more people that are like from small business owner, corporate, or do you have more people who are equine related?
A lot of I would say most of the equine assisted work I've done has been with individuals outside of the horse industry. They may have been around a horse when they were younger to varying degrees. And those clients have ranged from small business owners to shortly after our call, I have a local mastermind group. It's 6 business owners who meet monthly, and they're going to come and we're going to work through, they want to talk about communication styles. They also want to talk about how do we unwind and unplug from our business? How do we address some of those mental health issues? So the equine assisted work has been really interesting to have people there who, I even had one woman come who was raised in an urban setting and never been around horses. So for her to even come, and then the learning moments that she took out of that and shared with her group as far as how she needed to show up as a learner was pretty interesting to watch. Some of the traditional coaching that I've done, as I mentioned, like via Zoom or one-on-one, that has been with a number of folks in the horse industry. A couple of people that, given my background in the journalism side of things, especially in equine media, I've worked with several freelance writers who have come to me and asked for coaching, for them to decide how to launch their freelance business, how to find what was next in their freelance business. And so we worked through, what are your goals? Where do you want to be? What is most important to you? And one of the women that I coached, she was trying to start her freelance business. And what I thought was really interesting and an important distinction between like coaching and mentorship, she did a mentorship program and learned a lot of good practical, tactical strategies. Okay, you do step A, you do step B, you do step C. When I worked with her on coaching, it was, okay, really, where do you want to see yourself now? In 3 years from now, 5 years from now? What are the boundaries you want to set around your business so that you're running your business isn't running you? And really digging into, she had some imposter syndrome, and really digging into where did that come from? And how do we work around, helping you gain that confidence with the skills that you've already demonstrated to bring into this new business enterprise you're so excited to pursue.
Wow. So you really have like a range of topics that you cover. And I mean, from almost like a therapist.
I do want to be very careful. This is not therapy.
Right.
I'm a licensed therapist.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Like you work on the mental side of things as well as, the practical things. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, from leadership to communication. I mean, it all ties together for sure, but that's a huge wealth of knowledge that you have to be able to talk to people about and kind of give them guidance. That's amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate those kind words. And I would say too, I think it's very important when you work with a coach to find somebody who you feel 100% comfortable working with. Not every coach is for every person. I am not the coach for every person. Every coach that I work with is not for every person that I could refer to them. So I think it's really important to have a screening call with somebody that you may want to have as your coach and really get to know them before you start working with them so that you can maximize the investment that you're making.
Do you find people struggle to open up to you?
I think that is a great question because we all can get a little uncomfortable when we're vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find that tends to happen when we get further into coaching sessions. The first 2 or 3 sessions, we're starting at the surface level, and then we start peeling the onion away a little bit at a time. And when we start to get into our core beliefs of what make us who we are and how we can use those beliefs to make decisions in our businesses and our careers, that can be tough to have an honest conversation about. And so I find that people who really truly want to make a difference and want to make those decisions based on those core beliefs will open up over time, even if it's difficult for them.
Do you dive into the finances, people's finances of their businesses?
It depends. I will say that. It really depends. I am not an accountant. Some industries, like the freelance industry that I know well, I am willing to talk finances with them. I'll even share information with them as to how I started, how I do my pricing. But I am not an expert by any means. So if they have a lot of finance questions, I do usually refer them out to somebody that has a much deeper background in that area.
Yeah, I was just curious if that becomes like a sticking point, especially in the equine industry of people opening up about their businesses. Do they go that deep into it?
So on the content side of my business, I'm involved in two very different associations. One is in the equine industry, one is not in the equine industry. And the one that's not in the equine industry, we all share all of that financial data with each other, and offer advice, and don't accept a job for less than XYZ. If this is not a job for you, if it's at this hour or whatever. In the equine association, it's much more guarded, which is interesting to me, especially because some of those rates are set, as the member, you don't have a choice of really negotiating with a lot of those rates. So you'd think there'd be some more open dialogue, but it is fascinating to me to see the difference between equine and non-equine business realms. I'm
sure I would have assumed that was your answer as well, because I think, financial topics and financial advisors and people like that we've talked to have had similar feelings as well, that people don't want to share and don't want to open up. And I think maybe more so in this industry than in others. But I think people like you and coaches and others that want to help, maybe start breaking down a little bit of the barriers and why it's important to discuss certain aspects of financial arrangements in the industry. And that helps level the playing field for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I think transparency is also important for people, and integrity, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what I feel like we struggle with sometimes.
And as you were sharing that, it reminded me. So first I'll say, always talk to your financial planner or your accountant about important financial decisions. But I am part of we call it a business to business think tank. And most of I am the only horse person in that group. But what I have found is I have met with other business owners. One of them is actually a financial planner. And we have spoken very candidly about how much money they have in their 401k. And what it did for me as a business owner, I'm always like, am I doing enough? Am I going to have enough for retirement? Am I selling enough? Where's my business going? And by having trusted people that I could openly talk to about that, I saw, oh my gosh, this person is 50. Well, this person's 55, they're 10, 15 years older than me. And they're at that level. And here I am at my age with what I've done. Doesn't mean I'm going to take my foot all the way off the gas, but I'm doing okay. And so we spent probably a full day in January, the financial planner, this other business owner, and myself, just talking about numbers. And that was incredibly eye-opening and helpful to think about where I wanted to go next in my business. And so I encourage horse business owners, especially if you don't feel comfortable doing that with another horse business owner, find a network of other business owners that you can trust.
Yeah.
and
start having some of those conversations.
Great advice. I think that's
really
much easier for people to accept when they know like their colleagues or their competitors aren't going to know what they're making or how much they have or what they're charging. And find somebody that you know and trust that doesn't have a connection to your business and or in your industry and use their experience and insight. At what point in someone's career or in the path to starting or continuing a business do you recommend someone hiring a coach?
I think a good point to work with a coach is when you are finding yourself struggling with something, or you find yourself ready to make a change and you've exhausted other resources that you have available. So maybe you've attended some courses or classes. Maybe you have worked with a mentor or have sought help in other ways and then decide, I'm really committed to making this change or improving this particular aspect. Perhaps it's in a team dynamic at the office. When that really becomes a sticking point and you're committed to making a change, that's when I think a coach can be helpful. Because coaching takes a lot of work on the part of the coachee. I can ask a lot of questions, help them get thinking in the right direction. But unless they're willing and ready to commit to making some of those changes and taking those steps, they're not going to get the most out of the experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what do you think is the most common reason people come to you for help?
I think because they just don't know what to do next. Just this week, some of my favorite coaching work is to help people decide what is next on their career journey. And so I just had somebody introduced to me this week who he worked in manufacturing for his entire career. He went and became a coach, and now he wants to know what his coaching niche is going to be. And so we're setting up an introductory call to see if I'm the right fit for what he's looking for, and then helping him decide where is he going to hone in on his new path. So if we agree to move forward in a coaching agreement, I'll help him pull up the pieces of his job or his former career that he really enjoyed and got a lot of excitement and energy out of, and see if there's ways that he can pull those into his coaching practice.
Okay.
And what kind of preparation should somebody do before they sit down to find a coach or talk to a coach?
I think it helps to have some sort of idea about the coach that you are going to talk to, even on an introductory call. Whether it's somebody you follow online, it may be somebody that you get to know through social media, or because you listen to their podcast, or you have followed the work that they've done. A lot of times that can come through as a referral too. I've had coaches, I've looked for coaches for myself for certain things that I've wanted to work on, and those have often come from referrals through other people in my network and vice versa. So my suggestion is, take a look at that coach or coaches that you want to consider. Get to know a little bit about their background before you jump on cold. And that may, help guide the conversation and help you decide if it's going to be a good fit.
That's good advice. And what are the first steps that you do when you're working with somebody?
Usually it will start as an email. Like I said, either an introduction or somebody will come in through my website, and then I schedule a call with them. And it's really about a half an hour. I ask them some coaching questions that I would use in a regular coaching session, just to help uncover how important this change is to them, what they're willing to sacrifice to make that change, and why. And then I also give them an opportunity to ask me questions, and find, learn about how I coach, how it might fit into what they're looking for. And so it's an open dialogue. And I think that first call is really important before anyone signs any contract, to make sure that it's going to really work for both parties.
How long do your contracts usually last?
I have found, so for the one-on-one coaching, what I've found is I start with a 6-week engagement. That can be 6 consecutive weeks. For some people, that's every other week or once a month. And then at the end of that engagement, we sit down and we talk about, did you accomplish your goal? Do you feel like you're ready to take steps on your own, or do you want to extend that agreement? And it really depends on the individual. I've had some who have said, I got what I need right now. I have a lot to work on. So let me take a pause in coaching. And then they'll come back 3 or 6 months later and say, okay, I'm ready to move on to the next phase of what I was working on, and we'll restart. So it really does depend on the individual and their goals.
When do you think clients can expect to start seeing results? Is it completely dependent on how much work they put into it?
It's completely dependent on the work they put into it and the situation that they're working on.
Yeah.
Some things they can resolve and work through very quickly. Others, especially if they're very deep-seated beliefs that they're trying to work through or maybe alter a little bit, that can take a longer time.
Do you think that people who don't know what the changes they need to make take a longer time?
I think it depends on how willing they are to open up.
Okay.
Because if they're a little resistant, it can take longer. But if they're willing to be vulnerable, and there are a couple of tools that I like to use. One is called the Wheel of Life, and it kind of divides our lives into little pies, like our family, our relationships, our finances, and several other things. And I ask people to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 where each of those fall. And sometimes that alone is enough for them to say, oh, I didn't really know what I wanted out of coaching, but now I realize this is the area of my life where I've really been feeling a lot of tension, or it's just, I'm not getting energized here, and that's where I want to move the needle. And then once they kind of open up and look at that, things can move more quickly for them.
Yeah, because I would think, for me, I'm thinking, what would I need to work on as we're having this discussion, and what would I want? And I'm like, I don't even know. I wouldn't even know where to start. I feel like I need to come to you so you can tell me where to start.
Well, and that's an excellent point, because, I do think coaching is valuable. I invest in a lot of coaching for myself and my own business because I do believe in the value of it. I also think there's times where we maybe don't necessarily need coaching. We need to do inner reflection. Sometimes things are good where we are at, right? And that's okay. But if there's something that we are feeling that maybe we want to have a shift in the future, even if we don't know what that is, that might be the time to start working with a coach.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what kind of advice can you give people that is garners the quickest and the largest return in a person's career? Something they could do immediately, some kind of action they could take away from this that would help them.
My favorite, I don't want to say homework because it's not really homework, but my favorite exercise that I like to ask coaching clients to do is to create a pro and con list. So take whatever the topic is, take a sheet of paper, divide it into, put pros on one side, cons on one side, on the other. On the pro side, what can you imagine for yourself if you actually took action and worked towards whatever this goal or change was? What's the downside to doing that? And then once you have both your pros and your cons, is it worth your time and your investment to do it? Are you that committed? Is it going to make that much of a shift in your life where you're going to say, oh, I'm thankful I did this? Or is it, oh, you know what? Things aren't as tough as I thought they were, or I'm moving in a better direction than maybe I thought I was. And, you can then objectively evaluate what your next steps will be.
And does that kind of go the same for people who own businesses versus somebody who's working for a company, an employee going through a corporation?
I would say very much yes. And I relate that back to, we talked earlier about how much we love learning. As a business owner, we are probably all always thinking about what's next in our business. We can't remain static in this environment, and we always need to be changing. So having that pro and con list of what services do we want to offer? Is this one really worth my investment? Do I have the strengths? And if I have the strengths, do I have the passion? Because just because we're good at something doesn't mean it's necessarily going to fulfill us in our business. And so I find that pros and cons list to be just as useful for myself as a business owner and for others as they kind of contemplate what might be next.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I've actually been doing a lot of thinking lately about that passion side of things, because I'm starting to recognize when I see somebody that's doing a job, like I think there's a difference between being good at your job and then being passionate at your job. And I'm like recognizing it. This is a really funny example, but sometimes I watch the Saratoga races on Fox, and the commentators that are on there, they're so funny, but like they live it and they breathe it and they come up with statistics and they just sit there and they talk. And I know there's work that goes behind it, but I also know like they're so passionate about it. And I'm like, it's nice to like recognize that they're not just doing a job, like they live it and breathe it. Right. And it's such a difference.
You reminded me, one of the other things that I think anybody can do and benefit from is make a list. What energizes me? What drains me? You can do this whether you're working in a company or you're running your own business. And when you start to look at where am I finding that passion, because they can talk about the statistics right off the top of their head because they love what they're doing versus I'm doing this because it's paying X number of dollars more than this other thing. Or it might not even be money. It might be, this role is asking me to use communication skills that are not aligned with my natural style. And maybe I need to look for a different role where I can bring what is natural to me and enhance a role in that way. So that's another one is just, what's energizing me, what's draining me, and then what can I shuffle around in my business or my full-time job to bring those closer to alignment.
Yeah, that's really good.
And I think it's worth recognizing those things because a lot of times what is your passion is not feasible for your profession.
Right.
And I think so many people talk about it a lot these days that, you should be doing something that you're passionate about. Well, maybe if that is really something that's going to work for your lifestyle and pay for your home and, if you want to own horses and, that sort of thing. So, like you said, there's different ways to recognize if what you're doing is fulfilling you, even if it's not something that you're passionate about.
Right.
Those points are, they're not mutually exclusive, but you don't have to be passionate about what you do day to day necessarily.
Right. And you can be really good at it and not be passionate about it.
Exactly. Yes.
Exactly. And I'll use a personal example of my own. In a previous full-time position before I launched my own business, I probably could have stayed there a lot longer and continued to run successful businesses as side hustles because the skill part of it was very easy for me. But I found the interpersonal dynamics at that particular organization to be so in contrast to my own that I physically couldn't do it anymore. And so, kind of being able to recognize that certainly those skills I learned a lot on that job, and I was using skills that, as I mentioned earlier, were easy for me, but the dynamics of the culture and how each department worked with one another just was so far out of alignment with how I like to communicate with clients or how I like to work on projects that it just wasn't feasible for me to stay. And so I think that's important.
Yeah. And like you said, that pro and con list could have you seeing that it's not necessarily the job itself or the industry you're in that needs to change. It's just where you work or who you work with that needs to change. So, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of work that you could do on your own to kind of see where you're at and where you want to be before going to someone to help you put those changes in motion and set up a plan.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, I had a similar situation in a job that I was in as a farm manager before I took my current position. I had like this little gap year where I was the general manager of a smaller breeding farm, and I was really good at my job, but it was almost like I was too good at it because I did everything myself. I couldn't delegate. And I wish that I had gone through that process of, what's energizing me and what's draining me. And I might have been able to figure out a way to make it work. And I'm glad I didn't, because I enjoy my job now a lot. But, it is sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to like pull yourself back and say, oh, hey, I've got to reevaluate this. I mean, it wasn't the people that I didn't like. It was just so much work that I wasn't able to like separate myself from, and I was very, very good at it, but I just couldn't keep doing it because I felt like I was going to have a mental breakdown over it by not, by not delegating very well, because I was a perfectionist, and, there were some things that, I should have evaluated sooner than when I did, where I got to the point where I was burnt out and just couldn't see going forward anymore.
And that burnout is a bad place to be. I was actually going to add this, sometimes we need a coach to help us with that push. So I had said, since my first job out of college, I always wanted to have my own business, and I had been working on it as a side hustle. And I got to the point where I was so burnt out, and aside from some of the other challenges, just so burnt out that I needed a coach to just tell me. For me, it was financial, because I was always like, do I have enough money saved aside? My very first boss told me, if you're ever going to run a company, you need to have 3 years salary in the bank. And so when I was 22, I took that to heart. And so I was a saver. And the challenge was, every time I got a new corporate job, the salary went up. And so then the 3-year salary became higher and higher. And I got to the point where I was just like, I was burnt out. I was ready to have my own business, and I didn't know what to do next. And so that's when that was the first time I hired a coach. And it was like, okay, what's the real issue here? And how do you then pull the trigger? And so sometimes it is when we're also just stuck. We just are spinning our wheel in the same spot and just need somebody to help us grab our hand and say, let's jump off this ledge together.
Yeah. And I hope that we have people that are listening that maybe they're in that position and it pushes them to go and do that, because like looking back, I wish I had known about coaching and what coaches could do for you and how they could help you. And, it just probably would have made the transition a lot easier than having complete meltdowns.
Yes.
Yeah. And kind of having someone help parse through what is, okay, you may be miserable. What part of it is making you miserable?
Yeah.
And
Right.
identifying and saying, okay, that's what you need to change, and here's how you can change it. So I find that the opportunity to have somebody help you with that could be life-changing.
Oh, yeah.
It truly is. Yep.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of times when we're in those positions, I know myself, I feel like I'm in this black box over the top of my head that I can't see out of, that I can't get out of. I don't even know. And then once you like see a little peak of light, then it opens up everything, right? But until you have somebody to be able to say, hey, and for me, I don't know if it's necessarily even like, I think coaching and the business aspect is so much more helpful than maybe just having a therapist to talk to.
Yeah.
Because you have somebody who understands the business part of it for you that can kind of pick that apart, and help pick the burnout apart.
Exactly. I was very fortunate that it didn't come to major health issues, but at that point I literally could not get out of bed in the morning. The people that I worked with were like, oh, you need to talk to EAP. It's depression. I'm like, no, it's not depression. I actually was ill, so I had gotten to the point of burnout where I had mono, and then I had other things that complicated on top of that. And when I started working with this coach, even aside from some of the communication and culture challenges, which I've since gotten coaching on and would love to go back and try those skills and see if I could leave some more of that at the office. But really beyond that, I had said to myself, 15, 20 years prior that I always wanted to run my own business. And so why hadn't I done it yet? And it was like that juncture of it's time to, if you're really serious about this, that's where I needed help was, okay, how do I make this a reality now? And I'd waited and prepared, but I needed that push. And that's what that coach did for me. And that's what I think can help, like you said, start to see the light at the end of the tunnel and help us kind of get on that new path.
Yep.
Further to the topic, can you tell us what your book is about and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. So the book that I co-authored is Shoeing the Modern Horse, the Horse Owner's Guide to Hoof Care and Farrier Work. And I worked with the farrier professor from Cornell University to create this highly illustrated guide about everything that goes into how a farrier decides to shoe your horse. Everything from the horse's conformation to how the horse is working to any pathologies that might be in the hoof. And we also looked at the careers that are available in the farrier industry and how you get started in the farrier industry. And that project came about because I have been involved with equine media forever. And I happened to be at a seminar for the American Horse Publications probably, and this is either 2017 or 2019, and knew both the publisher and the editor of Trafalgar Square Publishing. And they'd been talking about wanting to put together this book. They'd had an earlier version that had been published several years before, and they were looking for something that was similar, but a little bit different. And so I just volunteered and said, hey, I'd love to, I've wanted to write a book, would love to step in and help you with this book. And the original farrier that we had in mind did not end up following through with the project. And I knew Steve Krause from Cornell, and I said, hey, I think he'd be a good subject matter expert for us. And the really interesting thing that emerged out of this, it started completely as a writing book project for me. That was the mindset I went in as, was this is a writing project. And it actually became a coaching relationship. How do I get the subject matter expert to bring forth all of his knowledge in a way that can be presented in written form that audience members will enjoy? So it was really interesting to see my own mindset shift around that project. And it has inspired me to kind of get more into thought leadership and helping other individuals who may want to write a book. Where do you start with that book? How are you working on getting your thoughts in an organized fashion in a way that captures the audience? So it's helped my brand because my name is out there, and it's also kind of helped define other ways that I can help people on their journey.
Do you think that experience would lead you to write another book and to, be on a topic that you already work on, like coaching?
Two great questions. So I do have some things in the works. Two things. One, I cannot share too many details on yet because we're still in the early negotiation phase, but there is a project it will actually feature the horse industry in it. And it'll be an individual story and journey, but connect to the industry on a larger scale that I'm really excited about because it will pull in some of that resilience, grit, and all of those things that we talk about in coaching. The other project that I'm really excited, and I've been working with a publisher on that topic, so we're kind of fine tuning and seeing if it's something we can bring to fruition for them. A project that I'm working on my own that I'm very excited about is I have recently launched a very small newsletter called Words of Winston. And it's actually named for our colt, Winston, who was born in March. But in that newsletter, I'm talking about the intersection of being around horses and leadership. And I have started to identify corporate leaders who are working outside the horse industry, but have been involved with horses either as a child or as a current owner, and what horses have taught them about leadership and how that they are incorporating that into their career. And so I'm lining up interviews with folks and excited to be launching some of that, hopefully in the fall, because I just think horses have so much to teach us. I learn something from them every day, confidence building, things that I didn't think I could accomplish with a young horse that when you think back about it, oh my gosh, that happened in the office too. And so finding folks kind of in those scenarios that can help get the word out to the broader world is something I'm really passionate about.
How many horses do you have now?
Too many.
I say the same thing all the time.
We had one horse for 10 years. And then last year I went crazy. We bred her for hopefully a ranch versatility prospect. And because she was going to be out of commission, I went and bought a 3-year-old. Well, he was 2 last year. So we have 3. And nice. We are at capacity because we work like no more.
And are they quarter horses?
They are. Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
And do you use them in the equine assisted coaching?
Yes. So my mare Bella is 15 and she got drafted 2 years ago. And it's really great because she's a very people horse. I trust her with she doesn't kick, she doesn't bite, she doesn't freak out. She's very unflappable, but she will not just do, so it brings up those points that we're struggling with that we may not realize. This spring, I did take he's now 3. I took Leroy to a session. I was a little concerned because last fall he was very mouthy and I certainly don't want anybody to get hurt or bit. But he grew up a lot over the winter and was phenomenal in the program. And he's a little bit more sensitive to just how you're showing up in your body movements. And I don't mean sensitive in that he will spook or startle, but he will either follow you or, just his reactions are just so much more sensitive than hers, and can really bring out some interesting conversations. I did a program through a community college and I had a woman come who was just so excited about being around the horses. And she had told me she was going to a program where she could just brush a horse every week, but she showed up so nervous that he wouldn't go anywhere near her.
Oh, wow.
And so it took us, even to the extent of at the very end, I said, oh, do you want your picture with him? I'll position him next to you. I'll take your picture so you can take this home and get him all set up. Before I can back up and take the picture, he walks away from her. And, I felt bad. I wish we'd had longer time that we could have actually worked through what happened. But I think for her, she walked away saying, gosh, I didn't realize how nervous I was when I came. And maybe or how my mind was being pulled in so many different directions. And so that was even a learning moment right at the very end of the session for her.
So you work with somebody else? Like how many horses total is typical to have during the program?
It depends on the size of the group. I did start using just one horse because that's what I had at the time. I have used 2 horses as we get up to groups that are over 5 people. I won't do a max. I won't do over 10 right now because our space is a little bit smaller. And I just feel like once you get over 10, people start to get lost in the crowd and they may not be as willing to contribute. So I have my own 2 horses that I use. The colt is too young. And then I have a couple of friends with horses that I know they're good citizens, well-traveled. They're not going to hurt somebody. So I've pulled them in on occasion if I have a horse like Bella with a colt and I couldn't bring her. So I have access to 2 or 3 other horses aside from my own if needed.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to have friends who are willing to support your work because I can't afford to support 5 horses on my own, but to be able to say, hey, can I pull you off the bench and use your horse is definitely much appreciated.
Yeah. How long do the sessions last?
It depends. I had a manufacturing team come out for an entire day. We started at 9:00 and we finished at 3:30. A lot of sessions tend to run about 3 hours. And I see that as it's more of an experiment to them. They don't understand necessarily what they're going to get out of it. And then when they come back, they ask for something longer.
Oh,
so I see this as I see those 3-hour sessions as a development phase in the business.
And it's all on the ground, just
Yes.
working with them. Okay, cool.
Yep. No riding. That's the thing I tell everybody. No riding.
Yeah, I imagine obviously not for people who have no horse experience, but for people who do have horse experience, it's not about getting on and telling them what to do with your aids. It's more the subtle cues on the ground that they need to work on.
Yeah. Am I being congruent? Am I showing up internally the way that I'm telling you I'm showing up?
Mm-hmm.
And horses can detect that better than any person can.
Right. Cool. Well, it's been really fun to speak with you about what you do and how you help people. And I think listeners will get a lot out of it, and, how they could maybe start their journey to, whether they want to make a change or make an improvement in their life or their career, and how a coach may help them. So thanks for speaking with us today.
I thoroughly enjoyed our conversations.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
So at the end of each episode, we ask guests the same 4 questions, and Connor starts with the first.
What is one action that women can take to make a big difference in their lives?
I would say this is something we talked about earlier, that what energizes me, what doesn't energize me list.
Yeah, that's great.
And do you expand that throughout your whole life? Like, do you expand that to work and family and hobbies and everything? I imagine it could be a pretty long list.
I do. So I do a solo retreat every January for myself. I don't really go anywhere. I just sit at a different table in my house, so I'm not at my desk. But I go through all the dimensions of, my business. How do I feel about how this is affecting my family, any hobbies, any volunteer work? And I look at the whole picture and then make my next year's plan based on reviewing it through that lens.
I've heard of that before, doing like a year review and going through all of that. I've never done it, and I always want to, but I'd like to, but I just
like to be the kind of person that does that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, on the writing side of my business, when I've done that, it has really helped me assess what clients to keep in my business and which ones I have potentially outgrown. We talked about there's only so much time to make a living to pay for our home. And sometimes, some of the clients that I've had to let go are people who I've really admired, enjoyed friendships with, but it didn't make sense in the business model to keep moving forward. And so, and I take that into account with how much of my income they made up, so it's not just, am I going to work with them or not? It's, can I replace them with something else? Can I let them drop off? And that has been a huge game changer in my business for me.
Yep. And what is the best habit that keeps you motivated personally?
I feel like all of my habits have gone out the window this year with having a foal.
Yeah.
For me, I think the best habit has been committing to getting up and working out every morning. Mm-hmm. And I keep it to 30 minutes. I'm not grinding away for an hour and a half, but I find that my body just feels better. My mind is more ready to work. And even on days it's really hard to get out of bed to do it, I force myself to, and it just sets up for a better day.
Yeah. I don't every morning, but when I was doing it, I felt like even when I pushed through, it made me be like, okay, at least I'm not going to beat myself up for the rest of the day that I intended to, and then I didn't do it.
Exactly. Because I know myself, if I don't do it in the morning, there's no way I'm
getting done.
Yeah.
I know. I used to be such a person who liked to like get up later. Not that I was ever allowed to growing up on a horse farm, but like I always liked the idea of like sleeping and everything. And now at this point in my life, I'm like, okay, I want to get up at like 5 a.m. and get everything done by 2 p.m. and be done for the day.
I know when I was working at corporate jobs, I worked out after work, right? So when I worked a full day and I'm like, I don't have that energy anymore. I need to start the day that way and then be done, like you said, by 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh, what's your favorite horse movie?
Wild hearts can't be broken.
That's a good one.
And I will say, fun fact, my grandfather was a pilot in the Air Corps during World War II. And while he was in New Jersey for training, he actually saw the diving horses, which was kind of cool.
Wow,
Oh, that's
cool.
awesome. Yeah.
And who would you recommend to be a future guest on this podcast?
I haven't told her this yet. However, I would recommend my friend Stacy Anatriello. She and her husband both work full time. They run a pretty full boarding stable, and they put on a phenomenal family friendly show circuit that has just grown. And I think she would have a lot to share about how she's made decisions to keep growing that event and this huge following that she has nurtured over the last few years. I mean, she'll have classes. It's appointed circuit, but it's not affiliated with a breed circuit. And she'll have 15, 20 people in almost every class.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is, good.
Well, thanks so much for speaking with us today. And we look forward to seeing more that comes out from your future projects.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thanks. I'm so glad that we got to have Katie on. I was really looking forward to some of her sessions in Saratoga, and with her not being able to make it, I was like super bummed. But then, being able to have this one-on-one time with her, I thought was really great, because then we could really dive into the questions. We're not on a time frame that we have to get done by. So I actually think it worked out for the best in the way it was supposed to.
Agreed. Yeah, I liked being able to kind of dive into what she does and how she does it and how it helps people. And even just finding out more about, how many horses she has and little personal things like that is really cool that we get to do on this podcast.
Yeah, writing the book. I think that was really cool.
Yeah.
And that it has helped her brand. And I think she had some really good pieces of advice throughout the entire conversation too. I liked her making pros and cons list. I really liked the idea of figuring out what energizes you and what drains you. I feel like she's had a lot of personal experience that was relevant to the topic, and that she could give examples of it. So,
yeah,
it makes it more relatable, I think, that way.
For sure. And I think most people might, well, maybe not most people. I think some people would hesitate to go to someone and have them help them on their business like this. I don't know. Maybe a lot of people have trouble asking for help and taking the step towards divulging everything about their business to someone. That can be really hard for people. So knowing that there's someone like her who, has the experience, kind of, if you are in the equestrian industry, she understands the horses and the commitment it takes to be in this industry. It's not a corporate 9-to-5 job. Even if you're not dealing with horses every day, you can be in other industries and be working, or I mean, not in other industries, but other jobs in the industry, not, working with horses directly, and still be on their time schedule. Right. And I really loved how she was able to break down what she does, because sometimes I think people don't necessarily understand what a coach is, and I think it was helpful for me to understand what her job is, what she can do for you. I mean, and it's so broad, right? Like what they can help you with. And then spinning into that equine assisted coaching part of it, I'm fascinated by that, because we've had other people on the podcast before that have talked about the herd mentality. And, we always talk about what horses give to us, that we take into our careers, our everyday lives, and what we get from them. And so like seeing people who may not be horse people come in, and then how also when she was talking about the horses reacted to people who are horse people and her experience doing it,
It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, that was great to hear. And I'm sure it really opens up other avenues of conversation and getting people to really look at themselves in a different way, especially if they're horse people and they can't get a horse to do something on the ground.
Right.
That's what I was imagining myself, like going to a barn and the horse completely ignoring me. Like, how do you react to that?
Right.
And, how do you work with them to accomplish something?
And in my mind, I was thinking about it because I've done some team sorting, where with the cattle sorting, and you pick the numbers and you have to get them in order, or they pick out one or two cows and you have to cut them out. So I've done that before, and thinking about how hard it was on another horse to get that accomplished. And then, like, if you're in an arena just on your feet trying to make horses move around. And as horse people, like, what do you bring into that, right? Because you're like, I'm going to make them do this. Like, I know what I'm doing, and I can make them do it. And they're probably like, yeah, good luck. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I've had that experience sort of when we've been trying to jump horses through a chute, or get yearlings when I was at Blue Chip to go into the shed to catch them for the farrier, and they're like, no, and you're like, I'm going to make you do it. And they're like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
It's very humbling for sure. Oh,
well, I think it was a great conversation, and I think people will get a lot out of it. And, be able to maybe make the decision to get a coach themselves if they find themselves at that point where they need someone to help them make a decision or move forward or make a big step and help their career or their business.
I would definitely consider it going forward, especially what I went through when, before I was in this position. It took a real toll on me mentally, not being able to make a decision and, figure things out. And so I definitely think that it's kind of nice to know that there's somebody out there that can help you through those type of things.
For sure.
I would say, I was going to say, one of the things that I would love to see people do as a team building exercise is take apart a bridle and put it back together.
You mean non-horse people or
yes,
horse people?
Non-horse people.
I know horse people who can't put a bridle together. So yeah.
I think
seeing non-horse people, like, show them a picture and have them put it together, that would be interesting.
Wouldn't that be an interesting team building experience? I wanted to say that to her, and I totally forgot it by the time we were talking, but I was like, and I think that hers is more hands-on with the actual horses and seeing like that reaction. But I was like, yeah, I could see myself doing a team building exercise for somebody and plopping a bridle down and being like, here's a picture.
Yeah.
Here's all the pieces, put it together.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Anyway, that's my little thought for the day. But anyway, it was a great conversation. Yeah. And I'm excited for the next one. You can find the links to today's guest and the show notes at www.eqbusinesswomen.com. Equestrian B2B is out twice a month on the 1st and the 15th.
You can find out more at eqbusinesswomen.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Find Equestrian B2B wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. You can have all 20 plus shows of the Horse Radio Network with you wherever you go with their free app for iPhone and Android. Go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network.
Now go list what energizes you and what drains you.